And we're live! Good evening, SPSM. I am really excited to be here. I feel like this spring, we've just really had a lot of momentum, and we are really excited about what we have to show you tonight. If you are tuning in for the first time, you may have heard that there was this really great conference in Denver, the Computational Linguistics and Clinical Psych Workshop, as part of the National North American Association of Computational Linguists, I think. There are a lot of words, because linguists have words, and they do things with them. Anyway, so we were there, Tony Wood and I were there, and Tony is still, he's still in Denver, and we're going to talk to you all about it. In addition, tonight, we have Glenn Coppersmith, who's making a return at my request. He had this really cool presentation he was all set to give about research that is super fancy, has not been released on any mental health channel, mental health journals, anything like that. So we're the first mental health venue to get to release this. And he was all set to present it when he had to, well, his wife delivered the baby, but he had to catch sort of suddenly, and he missed the presentation. So with all of that buildup, how could you not tune in? So I'm at Doc Foreman. I'm one of the moderators for tonight. Shout out to Sean and a bunch of you who are tuning in, and a shout out to all the CL Psych folks who may be tuning in tonight. But next, I'm going to introduce our other co-moderator and super wonderful guy, also known as Josh, Dr. Bart Andrews.
Good evening, everybody. I go by Bart or Josh or Barb. This is really funny. The best compliment I ever got, 17 years in the crisis line, the woman called in and said, "Please tell the nice black woman Barb she was amazing." It was me. So, and I took that as a high compliment. Thank you very much. Excited to be here. I was following the conference through Twitter. You guys did a great job live tweeting it. I learned a lot just from the live tweets. And I am excited to hear more and learn, because I think what these guys are doing is changing the world, and I want to be a part of it.
And just, Bart, where can people find you on Twitter, and let people know where you're from?
So I'm from Behavioral Health Response, a groovy crisis line in St. Louis.
Award-winning?
Award-winning, multiple award-winning. If we're gonna do brags, a humble brag. And I'm really excited, April. I may have mentioned this, but I created a Youth Connection Helpline program 5 years ago. And we're expanding that program into St. Louis City. We got formal notification of that. We met with the St. Louis City grant tours on, I want to say Friday, and we'll be going live with that July 1. So youth in St. Louis City will have all the youth that call us or text or chat. There'll be text and chat for St. Louis City youth now, which we're really excited about. Very cool. And ongoing active care coordination. Every call that comes in, we'll stay in contact with those youth and those families and their providers and who referred them until the kid is successfully linked for services. So we're really excited about that.
I mean, that's wonderful closed-loop service. And Noreen, by the way, says hi to you, Barb, Josh, or Bart. So we're excited, Noreen, that you're there. And everybody, look, I think his face is frozen. Wait, no, he's back. It's Mr. Tony Wood. Tony, say hi from Denver.
Howdy, everybody, from the Mile High City.
So, Tony, tell us a little bit about what you're doing for us, how people can tweet or find you so that you can help us mod what's happening today.
If you will just tweet at me at @ADWWW,
then
that would be dandy.
And Tony, just speak for a couple minutes about the conference, because this is one of the few mental health conferences where you went and your people were there.
I am blown away by the contents of this particular conference. Absolutely blown away. The rapid pace of innovation that is happening outside of the regular psychological channels is extraordinary. The fact that there were only 3 psychologists at the conference and/or 3 therapists is a tragedy. But not anymore, because they're going to get plenty of attention now. Lucky them.
I think it was a little more than 3, but it wasn't more than 2.
Yeah, there were some in the audience.
How many therapists that are actually working with patients? I thought they were clinical researchers.
Yeah, you're right. A couple of them were clinicians.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, but they don't work with patients. They don't, right?
Yeah, no. Some of them did in the past. But yeah,
Yes.
most of them are currently doing clinical research instead.
So Tony is saying we want to see clinicians in here because what we think this is going to affect clinical work.
Executives.
Say it again?
some healthcare executives like Bart Josh Andrews.
Or Barth.
I would have gone. Nobody even told me. Nobody invited me. I didn't get an invite. There was no.
We're going to fix all of this then. We're going to blow it up. And then everybody, our guest du jour, making a repeat. Everybody, this is Dr. Glenn Coppersmith saying hi to us again.
Hey, guys.
Glenn, show us your lower third again.
I got to find it again. So I'm a computer scientist, and this is the best that I can do for that lower third thing. You know, I'm apparently incapable of doing some Google Hangout stuff.
And Tony and Glenn were like trying to fix it, folks.
I also failed. I have to apologize.
With any luck, you'll get to at least see the slides that I'm planning to present. If not, I'll do interpretive dance, and we can have a grand old time with this.
Well, I'm just going to say, Glenn, that there are some things that technology fixes and some things that radical acceptance and emotional work fixes. Glenn, tell us a little bit about who you are and tell us a little bit about this conference before we get into the slides.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm Glenn Coppersmith. I'm a phony doc, not one of those real ones, although if anybody wants to give me an honorary MD for delivering my kid, let me know. I'm happy to work something there out. So I'll say a bit more about myself within the presentation, but let me talk about CL Psych itself, because that's actually really, really cool. This workshop was started last year by Meg Mitchell and Philip and Rebecca Resnick, and Philip is a computational linguist, and Rebecca is a practicing clinical psychologist. And the two of them apparently over dinner talked about this so frequently that there is this beautiful union that might be possible between these two worlds, computational linguistics and clinical psychology. And if only we could do this, if only we could do something there. So they finally decided that they would just, put together a workshop and see who in the computational linguistics community was interested. And boy, were they interested. I mean, I'll say more about it later, but there's just so much. If you give people good data and interesting data with a chance to have a real impact, they'll eat it up. And so that's exactly what happened. The last 2 years that this workshop has gone on, it's just this incredible energy. These people show up and really, really care, not just about the technology, but really about the underlying challenges, the underlying problems, because we all see that there's this glooming mental health crisis if we're not already in it. So there's it's this beautiful blend where every talk, every discussion is accessible to both the computer science audience and the clinical psychology audience. And I think we all make a lot of progress every time we're there. I know I learned a whole lot 2 days ago, whenever it was.
And I'm going to say the buzz for this conference, just so that you know, what I heard was that last year was, many of the participants said the best conference they'd ever been to, in their lives, one of their favorite professional conferences of all time. And they said this year may have even topped it. And I'm going to have to say I have never learned, it was never harder for me to live tweet or to learn fast enough for the duration. I felt like the end of one day of conference usually like how I felt the end of day 3. It's truly some sort of amazing brain download that occurs. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about this presentation and these slides. Give us a flavor.
I should also say I'm at Glenn Coppersmith, but I am not going to be looking at Twitter while for the next little. I can only focus on one screen at a time.
We got it for you, no worries.
Yeah, I was hoping that would be the case. You guys are good at that. So this presentation was meant to be given to a government health IT summit. This is someone else trying to do the same sort of idea, bring together the computer scientists and the people that have a healthcare need. It was not specifically focused on mental health, but that's my personal mission, so that's what I was going to talk about. And it's been modified slightly since then. I think it's more SPSME now. At least there's a couple of jokes in there, I would hope. But the idea really is, here is, I think, what my, I hate to put years on it, but maybe 5-year vision of where I think we can get with some of the technology that's already been developed. And there's no new research here that I'm talking about necessarily. It's a lot of sort of straightforward application of some things that we've done over the last couple of years. And I say we, let's be clear, this we is a very, very large we. This is, the groups that have attended CL Psych, the people that have worked in this field beforehand, and then people like yourselves that have engaged and sort of molded what we're doing and given us a better indication of how it could actually be useful to you rather than just, be fun to publish papers with. Is that about what you're looking for?
I think that's great. Keep going. Also, Crystal Roach wants to tell you that if you do any interpretive dancing, she wants you to do the Macarena while you present.
That's going to be hard. I don't have a whole lot of room here to do the turnaround bit.
Anyway, go ahead.
Does that work? Okay. All right, so I'm going to screen share with you, and with any luck, you guys won't see my face, but instead you'll see some beautiful, beautiful slides. If I could figure out how to work this computer thing.
Look, if I've never heard of this conference, it's definitely on my list for the future, +1 to the research numbers, hopefully. Look at that.
All right, guys. So I'm gonna talk, and if you guys don't understand something, want to interrupt me, please do, and I'll try real hard to make sure we're all on the same page here.
Cool.
So let's play a game and imagine a world for a moment. So after a veteran has served our country honorably and endured a war on our behalf, they seek treatment to help cope with what this has done to their mental health. Before they even lay eyes on a clinician, she already knows that they lost their job last week, haven't been sleeping well, and had 2 anxiety attacks in the last 6 days. When they do see the clinician, she has a list of concrete, personalized items to discuss with this patient she's never met. The session is thus guided towards the most pressing aspects of the patient's mental health. These items were the result of some automated analysis and act as a supplement to and evidence in support of the stated reason of the patient's visit. In fact, the clinician was algorithmically matched to this particular patient based on the challenges that they face and who they are likely to respond well to. So this patient leaves on day 1 with a treatment plan whose selection was informed by looking at all manner of relevant population and personal data, and analysis indicated that this is the plan that's most likely to work for this particular patient at this particular point in their life. So between now and the next visit, the clinician also has access to real-time information about the patient. So if there's a need for an intervention, the clinician can be made aware and intervene rather than waiting until the next in-person session. So as time marches on, and my slides might or might not march on. There we go.
Ooh.
As time marches on, the treatment plan is proving effective, and according to the metrics about the patient's well-being, collected automatically and without human effort, these metrics will continue to be collected and analyzed, occasionally included in reports to the clinician about their matriculated patients, and sometimes used to inform the treatment of the next patient walking in the door. So, what barriers exist to this brighter world that we're looking at? Currently, the clinician has little or no insight into the patient when they show up seeking treatment. The first encounter, as I'm told, is often spent fact-finding and building a little bit of rapport. The clinicians are not matched to the patients based on any clinically meaningful criteria generally, and the clinician's job is essentially done when the patient stops showing up. So let me quote some of my clinician friends here. Clinicians are compensated for their time, not their outcomes. Clinicians need real data in real time. They need that data analyzed and presented to them in a form that's amenable to interpretation and, most importantly, action. They need to use that data to make real decisions, and then they need to measure real outcomes about their patient's well-being. So my mission in life is to integrate technology into the mental health care and to make this a reality. I don't want any more of my friends returning from war whole in body but broken in spirit, and I don't want anyone else's loved ones lost to suicide. So my name's Glenn Coppersmith. I'm the founder of Quantify. That's what those 5 letters, when you spell it out, sounds like. I'm a member of the Data Guild, an adjunct researcher at Johns Hopkins University, and a consultant to DARPA. I'm a mix of computational, statistical, and psychological expertise, and thankfully, I'm not alone. I have a team that shares this vision and with expertise across the spectrum. And so we're working to empower clinicians, scale clinical impact, and support patient well-being. I see how we can get to that bright world that we imagined, and it really does take a huge coalition of experts across a wide range of groups. So here's why I think you care, and apparently I can't do the nice reveal here. My apologies here. So 1 in 4 people will experience a problem with their mental health this year. This year. I feel like I don't need to say anything else. Like that enough is that just gets me. If you care about money, there's some numbers in the billions of dollars that are spent in this, billions with a B. And if you care about deaths, suicide is a top 10 cause of death in the U.S. That's 1.5% of people alive today are expected to die by suicide. And so that's 4.8 million people in the U.S. alone. The rate for veterans is estimated to be more than twice that, closer to 3%. So suicide is the leading cause of death for women 15 to 19 internationally, and the second leading cause of disability and premature death. So the question for me has never been why mental health, but it's been why not mental health. So there are three ideas critical to changing things here, and thankfully I'm allowed to tell you about them and share my vision. So first, we have to look beyond traditional data sources. EMRs are a great source of information, but they have a very limited scope. What's happening to the patients when they're not interacting with the healthcare system? That's where all the important mental health stuff happens, in fact. And it's also the case that depending upon one source or signal is fraught with peril. And systems that use many weak signals from different sources are often more robust than those that depend on a single strong one. So, second, I think that language and computational linguistics has more to offer the field of mental health than biology, at least in the near term. And the third may be a bit counterintuitive, but if you want to drive research on problems that you care about, the best...
We may be having trouble there.
Okay.
We're back.
We're back. Temporarily, at least, as long as I don't try to say anything, right?
What the heck?
We're gonna take a quick technical break.
Yay! Da 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 da.
Doesn't seem to be fun.
Is it me?
Is it me?
I think it may be Bart. Technical break. Glenn, go ahead and unmute yourself and can proceed. Tony, does Glenn know that he's on mute?
I should be able to hear us.
Glenn, sweet
Glenn?
Glenn, unmute yourself.
Glenn.
Well, it was ear-piercing screeches or the dulcet tones of me of chatting. Here we go. We're there now.
Hey!
Okay.
Fix, go for it.
So I swapped out microphones. If you guys can't hear me as well, let me know.
We can hear you. I think it was Bart.
Oh, good. Or Josh, or whoever it is. You pick a name, we'll blame one of your names, not all three. Sorry, I'm still recombobulating just a bit there. All right, I think I'm recombobulated. All right, so the third is a bit counterintuitive, but if you want to drive research on the problems that you care about, the best way to do that is with data. Good researchers aren't starving for money, they're starving for relevant and meaningful data. So, looking beyond traditional health data sources, where might we be able to find some of these weak signals that we can braid together into a strong one? We turn to social media data. And while most of what I talk about today is going to be Twitter, there's nothing specific that ties it to Twitter. In fact, you name a social media platform and I can point you to a paper that indicates that there's some signals, quantifiable signals, relevant to mental health that you can find there. Oh, come on. There we go. So what sorts of health-related information can you find in Twitter? It's actually really astonishing once you start looking at this. So for example, we can measure something about smoking habits and when cravings occur just by searching for messages implying that the author is in need of or about to go smoke. Isn't that kind of cool? Very, very simple analysis there. So similarly, there's been a ton of analysis looking at influenza and using all manner of web data. So some of you guys might have heard of Google Flu Trends. Well, there's also Twitter True Flu Trends and a half dozen other things. But most impressively to me, some of our work at the World Wellbeing, some of our friends, not our work, our good colleagues and friends at the World Wellbeing Project, who I hear are going to be on your show at some point soon.
Way to go, Andy Schwartz! Sorry.
And I suggest anyone listening, if you want to hear some really amazing stuff being talked about, tune in when Lyle Unger and Andy Schwartz are talking about this stuff. Just incredible. So here I'm gonna steal a little bit of their thunder. Forgive me. But they recently demonstrated that one can predict the mortality rate from heart disease at the county level by examining Twitter data. And specifically, they looked at the language of the tweets geolocated to each county. And so really what's going on here is that language was more predictive of mortality rates than all of the traditional demographic variables combined. So income, smoking
Stop, say that again.
Yeah, no, seriously.
Twitter data was more predictive than any other way we'd ever tried to predict it before?
At least the standard ones that you would think of.
Oh my goodness. Okay, go ahead.
So income, smoking rates, diabetes rates, obesity, race, and I think there's one or two more. All taken together were inferior to Twitter alone. And so if you put this another way, some clever analysis of Twitter produced a better predictor than all the demographics we've looked at previously.
Wow.
And let's just put this in perspective. All that this Twitter approach takes is like a couple of guys and some computers. Really, really cheap. Wicked cheap, as we would say in West.
Now, not regular guys.
I said clever guys.
Okay. And
Yeah.
guys like northern guys, which is sort of gender-neutral guys. But, like, yeah, pretty much.
Absolutely gender-neutral guys. At least half their team is women. You can't do this stuff with men alone. Oh, man. So how can we use all this health data found in social media? Oh, come on, slides. Sorry, guys. So there are at least two different ways that we see this sort of information being applied. At the individual level, so using the data from an individual patient to inform their diagnosis and treatment, and at a population level, which is using aggregated data to enhance our understanding of the health phenomena. So can we provide individual level quantified information about a patient's life to their clinic? Is there a faster or less expensive way to do survey or to gather some population level questions, information about population level questions? And so to take a concrete example, what was the reaction of the population to Robin Williams' suicide? How would we even measure that today? Maybe via a phone survey like BRFSS, and that's an entirely reasonable approach. We'd then get to see the results sometime in 2016, if we're lucky. And there'd be all manner of hindsight biases induced by the retrospective nature of the questions. So most importantly, though, if we had wanted to actually do something in response to that, the opportunity would have been long, long past. So today I'm going to focus on these three specific questions. At the individual level, how can we improve the first patient visit? For the population level, how can we gather information from the population? And here we'll look at the Werther effect, celebrity suicides, and Robin Williams. But the billion-dollar question here, and this is definitely billion with a B, is actually how do we quantify and measure outcomes? So providing real metrics correlated with patients' well-being instead of correlated with whether or not they show up to treatment, I think will give the field a more solid foundation to optimize to. So this will in turn allow those billions of dollars to be invested more wisely or perhaps saved altogether. So how do we get there? First is the data. It's always the data with me. And so to support any sort of large-scale analysis or machine learning approach, we need what is termed labeled data or training data. So this is example data of the sort that we want to work on. Here we're going to talk about Twitter. And this is paired with the quote-unquote right answer. And so here we're talking about mental health, so let's talk about mental health diagnoses. We banged our head against a wall for a very long time trying to figure out where to find data like that. And it turns out that people with some frequency say things like this in their public tweets, and I have a couple of them up there. So why would someone say something like this? And maybe this crowd knows exactly what we're talking about here. But we've seen in some context here that they're doing this to fight stigma, to seek advice, or to offer advice, or to explain some actions that had recently occurred. And so this is a pretty normal thing to do. So from these public statements, we can create the training data that we need. Each user is providing the mental health label. And from Twitter, we can obtain their public tweets. So we have a lot of this data and enough to apply some statistics and machine learning to try to tease out what quantifiable signals are present in social media relevant to mental health. In order to do these techniques, we need what machine learning folks call feature vectors. And so I'll show you an example of this in a second. But we need to turn these streams of text into numbers. We call these numbers features. And so we can apply standard algorithms to them. We build one feature vector per user. And how do we come up with a feature vector? It's a really, really long story that I won't bore you with, but suffice to say there's thousands of numbers long, and each number means something slightly different. And this is really going to hurt without the animations, guys. Sorry about this. So I won't talk about all the specifics, but it's important to understand the sort of two general approaches that we take to create these vectors. And for all of you that we had much talk about magic the last couple of days, there's completely no magic involved anywhere here. We're just counting things. So one general approach is so looking at how often a user uses a particular word, or a phrase, or a class of words, or something else like this. This is usually called a lexicon-based approach. And some of you might be familiar with the work of Jamie Pennybaker, Luke, the Linguistic Inquiry Word Count. This is a totally classic example of a lexicon-based approach. So in essence, what Pennybaker and his crew have done have spent a lot of time saying that if you see this word, I, that evokes some psychological concept, the self. Or if you see words related to injury and death, that evokes some psychological trauma or death category. So, as you can't quite see here, but we're counting the number of times the user says I, and we're sticking that into one of these boxes down at the bottom of our screen here. And this is our feature vector, the boxes across the bottom. So we can populate a bunch of data there from the words that we know beforehand have psychological relevance. The second general approach is sort of the opposite of this. We're using what's called an open vocabulary approach. Since we have lots and lots of data, we can employ some algorithms to figure out which words, which phrases, and which usage patterns correlate with the mental health label that we care about, so whether or not someone has PTSD. So we can do this because we have hundreds of users and millions of tweets. You need lots and lots of data to make this work. And those volumes of data weren't really available prior to social media and prior to the techniques that we, the royal we, the field, not just us, we developed. So there's tons of information encoded in social media data that I won't go into beyond the language, except for one example. Just to give you a feeling of what else is out there. You can approximate insomnia by the number of their tweets that a person makes outside of the cycle of their usual tweets. That would be late at night for most people, unless you're tuning into SPSM, as far as I can understand it. But any of my tweets today are certainly going to be out of cycle for me. So once we have a feature vector for each of those users, we can take these feature vectors and run them through some standard machine learning algorithms to find patterns in the data and to produce a classifier. Since we've given the machine examples of the feature vectors, and this is derived from their text, along with the correct label, the thing that we're trying to understand, PTSD, there's some pretty standard math that we can apply and find patterns that separate the two classes, PTSD and neurotypical. Neurotypical, a new word that I learned at CL Psych. So think of this classifier as nothing more than a box. If you put in a new user's social media stream that we haven't seen before, it'll convert the stream into a feature vector, run that vector through some algorithms, compare it to patterns that it saw previously, and create a score as to how PTSD-like that user is, quote unquote. Social media data in, PTSD score out. Computer in between, nothing else. So these classifiers exist, we've built them, and we've used them over the last couple of years in a bunch of different ways to sort of prove them out through a range of experiments. And I'm not going to bore you with all of them, but at the end I'll show you where you can read about all that work and all the ways in which we've tested it out, so you can not just trust me, but go trust but verify, right? For now, I'm just going to tease some of those findings rather than go through all of them. So we built classifiers, so unless it's not clear to everyone in the audience yet, PTSD is a personal, I have a personal vendetta against PTSD, so that's why we keep going after it here. We built classifiers to separate users with a condition, here we're talking about PTSD, from the neurotypical users or control users. And these classifiers depend on the quantifiable signals in the data relevant to the mental health outcome. So if these classifiers work, really what we can infer is that our algorithms are finding some of those quantifiable signals relevant to PTSD. And these classifiers are just a computer crunching data available on the internet. And so these can be scaled up much more quickly to run on hundreds, thousands, or millions of users, much more quickly than you could scale up the number of clinicians that you might need. So I'll share one way we tested this out. This is up on the screen now, to verify that they match sort of real-world intuition. We've built one of these boxes to tell us about how PTSD-like something is, a person is. And we would like to tie it back to real-world intuition. So one would expect that there are higher rates of PTSD in a military population than in the civilian population, if only we could separate the military users from the civilian users. We couldn't figure out a good way to do that directly, but what we could do is we could take tweets geolocated to military bases. Those are more likely to be military users, and then in civilian areas, and look to see which had more PTSD-like language. And so can we tell the difference between the military and the civilian populations just from their estimated PTSD-like language? Shockingly, the answer is yes. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here talking to you.
Woohoo!
We observed some higher rates of PTSD-like language at military installations as compared to the civilian areas. And so what's more, we expected to find higher rates of those at bases that were primarily deployed as boots on the ground during Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom, the wars of the last 15 or so years. And so this, once again, matches intuition. We find higher rates of PTSD-like language in those high-deploying bases than in the low-deploying bases. And so this is one of the many ways in which we're seeing that our classifiers sort of match real-world intuition. And I hasten to point out.
Be very clear what the difference in the timeline is in gathering this. That you're able to get this specific, and from the conference, what I've learned clinically is you can get even more specific and study variables with a high degree of accuracy. But what's the timeline that you can do that with?
Between when you ask for it and when we give you a score?
Yeah.
It takes longer to transfer the data from Twitter, so we're talking like seconds, than it does for us to run the analysis.
Just remember, like clinicians, not years.
Yeah.
Moments.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, keep going.
While your patient is signing in, you can learn some of this stuff. So I should say that in this particular case, the differences are really quite small, but they're measurable. And so everything I've said here is about PTSD. However, we have similar results for many other conditions, and so I've listed the best of them here, and I'm happy to talk about them some other time.
And do mention, we want to give a shout out for borderline personality disorder, because we have a lot of folks who've been tweeting about this from the BPD crowd, who are very interested in advocacy and treatment for that disorder, and we just talked about it the week before. So, of course, military and suicide prevention and BPD and suicide prevention are very recent to this chat. So for those of us in our audience, like, he can directly do research not only for suicide prevention, but he's saying this is a new research application that could really do things for borderline personality disorder, for example.
And we are psyched to do so.
Okay, sorry. I'm trying to answer questions for you.
No, I'm not watching the feed. I really appreciate that you guys are. Okay. Whew. I thought we were going to go into another shrieking moment there. So there's another crucial mental health issue, especially to this crowd, and that's unsurprisingly suicide. So we have another study that we just found out was accepted for publication. It's not yet been published, but I'm going to share with you just a snapshot of some of this today. We found evidence of the Werther effect on Reddit. And so Reddit is another social media site. It's sort of set up as a forum, so it's longer form than Twitter. You actually have people posting pages of content at times. And so Redditors, as they call themselves, or we call ourselves, yeah, I think that's how I'm supposed to say that, they post links and stories and have public conversations about it. And so we examined a year's worth of data during which there were 13 celebrity suicides. And the Werther effect is an uptick in suicides after the suicide of celebrity with some media coverage. So we found a few interesting things, one of which was an increase in suicide-related postings, which is not entirely surprising. And the second is that they're actually qualitatively different. There was an uptick in harsh self-criticism type language that was there just after a celebrity suicide, compared to even the other suicidal ideation type posts that were there previously. So that's really interesting. The quality of the conversation actually changed. And this effect was present for major celebrities like Robin Williams or for more minor ones like Uday Kiran. So taken together here, we have a few interesting ways of creating these little boxes that can take social media data from a user, really language data from a user, extract and quantify some data relevant to mental health, and produce a score. This is so simple, this concept, but I see some really transformative power for mental health. So why do I think that language offers us so much promise? Why in fact does it offer more promise to mental health than biology? Why is it so transformative? So what exactly do analysis and interventions need to be accepted and useful? They need to integrate into patients' lives and clinicians' practices. Otherwise they won't be used at all, totally useless. They'll need to be affordable enough to deploy widely because this crisis is growing. And they should provide quantified information in real time. And they need to scale up to meet the size of this. So let's look at the current ways we gather information, interacting with a clinician, and a bunch of biological measures, genetics, epigenetics, fMRI. Each falls short along some critical dimensions, and none can be scaled up in some real-time fashion. You don't get to have your clinician over your shoulder all day, every day. On the other hand, our research, those at the CL Psych conference and the giants upon whose shoulders we stand, we have plenty of evidence that there are some quantifiable signals relevant to mental health in language data, and many, many sources of it. In fact, that sort of technology might be the only one that fits all 5 of these criteria. Hence my bold claim that language and computational linguistics has more to offer mental health care than biology, at least in the near term. So how does all this influence the driving questions we had? So for the first question, that means that if we had a way of producing a series of mental health-related informations from a person's public social media stream, and that's just one of many sources available, I hasten to point out, of a similar real-time quantifiable nature, if the patient opt in to allow an algorithm to run over their data and produce a report for their clinician, we can go a long way towards that brighter future we all fantasized about in the beginning here. And second, since these classifiers scale tremendously, we're able to gather population-level information at an unprecedented rate. So that's how I was able to tell you something about the reaction to Robin Williams' suicide. But that's really just the tip of the iceberg on the population-level analysis. But the really, really critical piece here is the ability to measure outcomes over the long term, well after a patient has left the care of the clinician. These ideas enable us to, as we'd say in Boston, wickedly scale. This gives us a cost-efficient opportunity to gather well-being metrics and actually measure outcomes in mental health care. They also can provide some warning and a chance to intervene if the patient starts to go downhill, not after they've hit bottom, but actually as they're starting to head down. There's also a chance that we might be able to rapidly improve our treatments too and tailor them to the particular individual, all slightly different applications of this one general box, this general technique. There's so much more that I could say here and talk about, but if you're interested, I hope you'll reach out to me. I will not take up all of our time on air here. So let's return to the ideas I shared with you. I've shown you the power of data from unconventional sources and evidence that the power of many weak signals braided together is strong. And I've shared the way that I think language is more promising than biology in the short term. And there's one thing left there. Truthfully, the hardest part of this wasn't the analyses, but it was finding the darn data. So I took some of this data, I anonymized it, and I made it available to some of our colleagues to do research with. You know what happened? They did research. Lots of research.
Ooh, look at that!
People from many organizations, big and small, industry behemoths, startups, academics, literally from across the country worked on it. They were so excited to get their hands on the data, many of them flew to Hopkins for a week-long hackathon just to get at it before it was released to the other people who weren't there.
Wait a minute, we didn't have to get like massive approvals, massive amounts of funding, and take 6 years. People just showed up and did this?
Yep, exactly. So this is in November. Oh, wait, you want to talk about speed, April? This is in November. There are at least 6 papers written on it that I'm aware of using this data. And half of that CL Psych conference, roughly, was papers using this data. So these researchers didn't need money at all. No one even asked for it. We did provide pizza. I have to say that. We did provide them some food. But there's the common theme is that they need good data, impactful data, and it's really hard to come by if you're a researcher. But I suspect that a bunch of you guys listening out there have it in spades. So if you want to make a dent in a problem and you want to get smart, motivated people partnering with you to solve it, consider finding a way to get them working on your data. And if you don't know where to start, reach out. I can help. So I hope you guys see the value that I see beyond traditional data sources for your problems. The power of and potential, really, for computational linguistics in mental health. And the researchers are really starving for good, impactful data. But don't you dare take my word for any bit of this. I've linked to a bunch of the relevant published work here. I'll make some version of this available. I'll tweet it out as soon as I have enough time to sit down and do it right. But I want you to go read these papers, look at them, and see if you believe us too. If anyone's interested in the more details about what our merry band of misfits, as we certainly are, what we're doing to punch a hole in this mental health crisis that this country is facing, or want to talk about the challenges that you in particular are facing, do reach out to me. I will leave you with this quote from Alan Turing, one of the grandfathers of computing. We can only see a short distance ahead. We can already see plenty there that needs to be done. Thank Thank you for your time.
Oh my God, that was amazing. Let me, Glenn, while you're getting wrapped up, let me come back. The stream is ridiculous.
We've got some questions.
And you've got some in the sidebar. Karis Myrick is a fancy, super important national mental health leader who specifically talks about lived experience of mental illness and doing peer advocacy and peer support. And Karis wants to know how computational linguistics might be used in peer-delivered services. Like if a peer has a warm line or a warm chat, how could you, for example, use your methods with that to see if peer services are effective?
So the possibility for pairing this with peer resources, I mean, this is like the crux of it. We can't scale the clinicians. We might be able to scale the peer resources. So if we could use this and say, hey, this person, I know that you two have never talked, but we can analyze a little bit of data here and say, the people that have responded well to peer support person number 17 look like the kind of people that you are. And they look like they have similar problems. So, I know I have a couple of peer support people that I can reach out to, but I would bet that you're going to respond best to peer support person number 17. Let me connect you with them rather than some random person. So that's just one piece. Huh?
Karis is super wonderful, by the way. You don't know her, but you've got to meet her, and she's super fancy. Karis, did you hear that? Anyway.
I'm game. Let's do it. Where do I have to go?
I'll hook you up.
Okay.
And then Crystal Roach has a couple questions. She's that wonderful early career professional I was telling you about who knows all sorts of things about mental health and Tumblr. She said, so in theory, a person seeking counseling, like they would need to sign a form, and then it would be used to learn more. And so we actually are having several folks from your conference, which we'll talk about in a minute, who will be on SPSM. But talk a little bit about Lyle's commentary about opt-in, getting people to do opt-in monitoring.
So I will get to Lyle in a minute, but I want to be very clear about this. That the only way, and this is throughout everyone that I've talked to doing this kind of research, we all agree that the right way to do this is opt-in. If you don't want us working on your data, we won't. We have enough problems to solve, and so we're not looking to go out and run this on the entire population or something like that. That's somebody else's gig. But to Lyle's point, so they're doing some, I don't want to steal too much of their thunder, they're doing some amazing work.
Either.
Yeah, they get an 80% opt-in rate where people say, yes, please analyze my social media data. Do some things for me. In fact, maybe if you don't even have to necessarily do things for me immediately, but figure out how to make that work. We understand what you're trying to do here, and we'd like to help. 80%! I don't know of any experiment that's had 80% opt-in rate.
Certainly not in mental health. And then Crystal Roach also then, and this goes to Resnick. So we're talking about Schwartz, we're talking about Lyle, we're talking about Resnick. Like these are the folks that are coming on. But you guys all got interested in exactly the same things that lit me up. So then she also says, couldn't this also be used to help a person or clinician pinpoint manic and depressive states, like if they were bipolar or if they were borderline personality disorder and they had very rapid swinging, and so monitoring was actually hard? And the answer is?
Oh, absolutely. And so I didn't talk about anybody's specific research, but Philip Resnick, that's just the perfect person to talk to.
And
so
he's tweeting tonight, right, folks?
Yes.
Excellent. Hi, Philip.
So, Crystal,
so
tweet at it's PSRESNIK.
I think it's...
Give it a P.S. Paul Sam RESNIK.
And yes, and they're going to talk about this. Like we have the schedule for the upcoming year, so you guys are asking the same questions. Before we talk about this, okay, go one more, Glenn.
I want to say that I'm not going to share any of Philip's results, but say that he, in particular, looked at that temporal aspect of it and has some really, really nice results on it. So you tune in when Philip does.
So sexy, but I'm gonna have Bart. What I'd like to do is have Bart sort of react to this, because Bart, this is your first time really hearing the presentation, and then we want to talk a little bit about the CL Psych conference.
Yeah, Glenn, that was amazing. I was at times I wanted to tweet and see what was going on the thread, but you were so captivating.
Excellent. Thank you.
I think one of the things that really hits me is that our language is kind of like biofeedback of our emotions, right? I mean, it really does. The words we're using gives us a window into what's going on with people. And if you think about it, all of the things that we're all interested in terms of depression, whether it's people with borderline personality disorder, people at risk of suicide, that's all occurring in a social context. And how do we communicate? We communicate with language, right? So it's the primary medium that are when we're struggling that it's coming out. So finding these reference points to help us say, hey, this person is doing better or they're doing worse, and being able to use data to mine that, I think is really, really cool. One of the questions, I think it was Sarah Knox talked about, using this sort of thing to target advertising and promotion for crisis lines and services, right? So we learned the hard way that Twitter users do not like, because we worked with some folks that developed an algorithm to identify people with depression and at risk of suicide on Twitter. Individuals do not like being singled out at all, right? The response rate, and Suicide Lifeline folks have come on this, the response rate to people being reached out to when they've been identified, probably correctly, you don't get a lot, right? But if we could develop a piece that's there's self-agency involved, where there's a way to put things on their feed that grab their attention so that they're not being targeted so much as resources are being made available to them that they would seek out to, right? So is that possible? How would that work?
So I suspect it is technically possible, and I would have to be convinced that is the right way to go about it. Yeah. I suspect that. So that's sort of not opt-in, right? So there's someone that, so there's this is, I mean, you've touched on like the critical problem here. How do you reach it out to the people that haven't been reached out to? And I don't have the right idea there yet, but it seems to me like there's a combination of peer support. So find someone that has said, I would like to be, someone in their network, someone that they are friends with, who has identified themselves to us, to clinicians, to however you're looking at it, to say, right. I would like to be a peer support person. If you see, if you have whatever it is, help me to spread the message to the people that I know about. So rather than singling them out, even that way, to say that, listen, here's somebody that I trust that's saying, hey, if any of you guys are thinking about this sort of a thing, reach out to me. You know me. I will help you. I'm not going to do anything. You know what I mean? I think there's a beautiful interplay between peer support and some of this stuff. And I'm not even certain it involves too many algorithms here. I'm not. So there's something to be done there. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I think that's key. I think one of the things that everybody's struggling with is we got two different groups of folks. We got the groups of folks that are reaching out for help, that are engaged. How do we help them better? Mm-hmm. And then, but the bulk of folks that really need help, and I think bulk of folks that are at imminent risk of suicide, are not engaging in a way that we would like them to engage or that we think would be helpful. Well, that's our problem. How do we use this? It's our problem. How do we use this? So Sean from Stuck on Social Work, who's amazing, posted this amazing article from Reddit about how the Suicide Watch on Reddit, how that developed, and it was very organic. And at one point they had posted the NSPL, the National Suicide Lifeline number, prominently, and people were pissed about it. They didn't want it up there. They weren't coming to the site to have this phone number thrown at them. They wanted to be there for each other and hear from each other. So if there's ways that we can learn what language and what ways to communicate to get more people engaged, and that's really where I think there could be a power in language as well.
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree. So that's one of the things that came up at CL Psych, that there's Chandra Brown-Levy, I think, is the one that said this, that she wants to go back and use some of this stuff to look at what we're like, look at the questionnaires, look at all the standard things, and say, like, is there a more effective way to get at it? Can we engineer better language here that will produce better response rates or more adherence to the treatment plan or adherence to the interview plan? I am so with you. That is just right. There's so much there to be done. Agreed.
So I'm going to wrangle us in only because we've only got 12 minutes left. And what I'm going to tell all of y'all who are on the Twitter feed and to our guests, when I told you I spent a day, just my brain just went like this. There is literally that much potential here, and I think it's been a long time in mental health since we've seen something that could have big results, this much low-hanging fruit. But we're going to have more SPMs on this, and we're going to help you get connected with these professionals who want to build bridges with the mental health community so that you can ask these questions, because there are more questions in the feed, and they're fairly technical. And let me tell you, Dr. Christy Hollingshead Sites would tell you it's not magic, it's hard work and coding and expertise, but there are things that can be done that to us clinicians feel like magic. Glenn, I would love for you to go ahead and talk about what the CL Psych conference is just a little bit more, and a little bit more about what computational linguistics is. Dr. Holland said Sites would like you to sort of review that, and we wanted you to just sort of explain the whole deal to us.
Before I say any of that, anyone who is tweeting at me that I'm clearly not watching, I will make every effort to get back to you. It might be a couple days, might be a week or two, but I'm going to get back to you. I promise. Send me a question if you have it. So on computational linguistics, it's all, and as Christian, I feel, or Dr. Helling said Sites, and I feel exactly the same on this, we're really good as computer scientists at counting things. Really, the computers are good at counting things, and we're good at directing them as to which things to count. That's underlying almost all of computational linguistics. All of computational linguistics, and certainly most of the stuff that I'm talking about here is really just counting and saying what things are showing up more or less in various places. So the computational linguistics sort of writ large, there's a lot of stuff going on in there, and you can basically think of it as anywhere that some language data is touching a computer. And so if you've got text and you want to analyze that text, that's computational linguistics. Some would argue that if you've got a speech signal and you're trying to learn something about what words are being said, that's computational linguistics too. There's a bunch of these things that are lined up. And the field is huge. What we're talking about, in fact, almost all the stuff that I presented and a lot of the stuff that's being done here is very, very simple by design. We're not trying to do anything fancy. It's trying to just show like there's a lot of power just sitting there waiting to be captured.
And why now? Can you explain sort of why this is happening at this moment in history?
I can't say for certain, but it really is this interplay between I can't think of a time in our past when we have had so much language data available that this is really like a journal study, like a diary study from all the standard psych stuff, but it's at a massive scale that people are chronicling their lives in real time, and they're putting it somewhere publicly that is accessible. And so never before has that been the case. And that is really the critical piece here. And us being able to go back and analyze it and applying this to mental health is just, that's a reflection that is just coming from the fact that there is this massive language data available. You look at most fields, I would say, that have tried to do something with social media data, and you see that they learn so much information about it. There's just so much information there that had previously been untapped because we didn't have that sort of people writing about themselves and writing about their daily experience and everything that's going on. Does that about cover it?
That's perfect. That is a question I'm often getting asked, like, why is this happening now? And I'm like, let's give them a clear explanation because I think it has one. So talk a little bit about like the format of CL Psych and where the next one's going to be. Like, if there are a lot of people who want to go and they want to know more.
Well, that's a fantastic question. I'm going to point you all to the Google group that we are setting up. We actually don't know where the next one is going to be, and that's CL Psych at Google Groups. Totally simple. So if you go there and request to be put on that group, you will get notified of all the neat stuff coming up and where we're going. It's going to be a low traffic list. I'm not going to spam your inbox, I promise. But go sign up if you're interested. And I will tweet stuff out on Twitter when we know more about where the next one's going to be. But the format is really critical here. So it's the papers that are presented have generally been natural language processing and computational linguistics papers. So there's generally computer scientists that are doing the presenting. However, they don't get the floor entirely. There's a clinical discussant, or more than one, attached to each of those papers. And so what happens there is there's this beautiful interplay where the computer scientist is clearly speaking to the clinical discussant who they know is about to stand up next and say something about their paper. And thus it's pitched at what's going to be clinically useful and relevant. And then the clinical discussant gets up and talks about what it is that they see that's relevant and put this in some context. So this is like a forced union between the two fields. And I say forced only that it's magical when it's there. I mean, for you guys that were there, I think you experienced.
Oh my God!
That it's just a natural union. The people that are there really care about both sides of this. But the idea really is that every paper is talked about from a computer science point of view and from a clinical psychology point of view, and it's from my perspective, it's the right way to do it. And that's totally credit to the original organizers, Philip and Rebecca Resnick and Meg Mitchell. They are the ones that set that up.
And I'm going to say, as a clinician, first of all, y'all are a little intimidating because you're so brilliant. And all the clinicians had this experience of having our minds sort of blown and being super impressed in the best possible way, like intimidated in a good way, like, wow. But because we were discussing it from different point of views, you walked away knowing things, which in a very different way, which is very different than where everyone within one field presents a paper and we all sort of understand it our own way. The paper would get presented, and then there would be this sort of cross-field discussion, and then each field would ask each other questions about it.
Right.
I felt guilty because I couldn't tweet adequately because I was thinking too hard.
Well, that's good. That just whet their appetite. They should come to the next one, right?
Yeah, they're all saying have it in Baltimore so they don't have to hitchhike, okay, Crystal? Don't hitchhike. We'll find a way to get you a ride. There's also a lot of questions. The peer support community, multiple tweeters, want to know how they could get this kind of tool in a way that would help the peer support community. And I mean, like, half a dozen folks have mentioned this. Like, the peer support community is faster on this even probably than the clinicians. Like, what would they have to do to pair with the CL Psych folks?
So I think they'll find willing partners. And so a couple of us have reached out to at least one peer support entity to try to work with them. If there are others, let's all have that conversation. And I mean, I think rather than do it 6 or 7 times for 6 or 7 different groups, let's find the common piece of it and do it together. I mean, let's do it. Come email me, contact me. Let's set it up. Let's do it. I'm so for it.
And I want to let's give a shout out to Moon Moon, who is answering some of the research questions. We have several of the CL Psych folks who are on the Twitter feed. So we have Dr. Resnick, we have Dr. Hullington Seitz, we have Dr. I'm going to say Chowdhury. She's just moon to me, and she's so cute. You just want to squeeze her. And these people are amazing, and they're answering questions on the feed right now. Do tweet them, do follow them, do join the Google group. They're a really accessible group who are just into this problem in a way that will excite you, will match, for all of our folks who are advocates, will match how you feel. We are getting to the last couple of minutes. Folks, I can't watch the feed anymore. It's going too fast. We are getting to be time for final thoughts. Bart, can you help bring us to final thoughts?
Yeah, so one of the things that really hits me listening to Glenn and listening to the research that he and other folks like him are doing, this is truly multidisciplinary, right? And I think one of the reasons that psychology and treatment has stalled, and I'm going to say this, I think that we've stalled, we're not making the progress we should, is that we have not been multidisciplinary. And I think this is where so many pieces come together, where media technology, where computer linguistics, where psychology and psychological theory, where linguistics, where all these things come together, and we can change the world with this stuff, right? And we're leveraging each other and we're working together. I will tell you that I can see many clinicians are going to be nervous about this, because I don't know if you guys remember, but back in the 80s there was an attempt to do research on the deleterious effects of therapy, and it didn't go anywhere because nobody would fucking participate, right? And this has the potential for really showing people where they're doing things well and where they're not doing things really well. It also means being on your clients involved in their social media life, which I love, to be quite honest, but that can be really scary for folks. Even if it's in a limited sense, there can be some fear there. But it's time for us to get uncomfortable, because that's when change happens. So Glenn, you're amazing. Thank you for all you're doing. I hope I get to go to the conference next year.
Woo-hoo.
I think you're required attendance.
Tony, give us your final thoughts.
It's a mind blower. It's a mind blower, kids.
Nothing.
You gotta watch the hashtag. You're gonna have to read through all this crap. You'll never believe the amount of activity we've had on this. I can't cover all this. I can't believe how engaged this makes people. Also, the potential for this technology to help people at scale is absolutely stunning, because of the 1 and 2 at a time that we're all fighting right now. Mm-hmm. And by no means is this has any potential to eliminate traditional therapy. Mm-hmm. However, its potential for augmenting those relationships at scale is an extraordinary leap forward.
And Glenn, give us your final thoughts.
never a dull moment with you guys. I really appreciate the platform to get out here, and so we've had so much more engagement since the last time that we talked, and you guys coming to CL Psych was a massive boon. I think we all learned stuff. The computer scientists and the clinicians and whatever you are, Tony, and it's just that we need more of this, and I'm wholly in favor of these communities coming together and really making a dent, because I've had it with this mental health crap. We're gonna fix this, and I'm there. Let's do it.
I'm gonna just quote Crystal Roach: "Teamwork makes the dream work," as the final thought. I thought that was the most succinct one out there. My final thought is that we have all these people who care desperately about this problem. We haven't had solutions that I think had a prayer of really doing what needed to be done at the scale it is really required. This has a real shot of moving the needle. We will have more, folks. Don't worry. We're working on the program for SPSM for next year. This is our last couple of weeks of SPSM before we go on summer hiatus, so make sure that you tune in. But also make sure you connect with the folks using the hashtag CLPsych tag, because they want to chat with you. Join the Google group. It's worth it. Connect on Facebook. Connect on the SPSM Facebook page. Tony and Bart and I and all of our SPSM community have done a lot to keep this channel really lively and active, just so that these relationships can happen. You've had another late Sunday evening with us. Please don't drink any more coffee. You've got to go to bed, because Monday's going to happen. And share this with all the folks that you know. Let's get the word out that this happens, because the mental health community did not know what the linguists were doing, and now we do. And we need to start figuring out what we can do with this. Everybody, you can catch us Sundays, 9 p.m. Central. Catch us on Facebook at SPSM. Follow us at SPSM Chat, and have a lovely, lovely week. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye. Good night.